Welcome to Circle Podcast, brought to you by Circle Sanctuary, one of the oldest nature spirituality churches in the United States, connecting people of nature-centered paths around the world. Join us throughout the week for a variety of shows discussing various topics, celebrating the divine in all of its forms through nature worship, rituals, education, and building bridges of community. Welcome to Urban Unwitches, a podcast to educate, inform, and expand the pagan community. Please join our Discord channel, Urban Unwitches Podcast. Follow us on TikTok at Urban Unwitches, and listen to all our past podcasts on your favorite podcasting platform. You can also join us on YouTube at Urban Unwitches. Now, back to the show. This is Dia from Urban Unwitches. I'm letting you know that the audio for this particular episode is a bit bad, but we've done what we can to correct it and felt strongly about the episode that we left it alone. We hope you understand and enjoy the show. Mercury retrograde.
Mercury can caress my succulent undercarriage. I am irritated. There we go. I'm telling you, technology this whole last week. Also, I've noticed when I go through the when I don't go through the Zoom app, when I go through the web, my picture quality is not quite as good. It's a little grainier.
Interesting.
But that's what I did. That was the first thing I did was, since I've had issues with the app, I tried switching over to the browser. So this'll work. Jesus, crispy on a cracker.
Cheez-Its.
Gosh and his son Jeepers. Did you ever see that show, The Unbreakable Kimmie, Smidt?
No.
It was the kind of ridiculous that you should not be in a natural state to watch, but it was hilarious. So the whole front of his John Hamm, sorry, Josh, I don't know. John Hamm and Josh Duhamel get confused in my brain because I would go on a date with both of them. So John Hamm has this like end of days cult, and he has these three women who are in a bunker with him, and he is just the dumbest cult leader that ever existed. He's done no research into religion. He thinks he's just spiritual. And so they worship Gosh and his son Jeepers. And they think the whole world has ended. And so these young ladies grow up in this bunker underground where they have to ration everything. But he's got this whole other room with like a jukebox and liquor and all this other stuff. He's super happy. But Kimmie Smidt comes out of this bunker and she knows nothing about the world. So she's this pure, innocent soul. And then she meets Titus Andromedon, a New York gay man who... the hilarity ensues, and they move in together. And then I think the grandmother from the second Addams family is their landlord. It's great. It's hilarious. Utterly stupid. So.
What is that? The Unbreakable Kimmie Smidt?
Yes, the Unbreakable Kimmie Smidt. And the blonde from 30 Rock, I can never remember her name, but she's like really good friends with Tina Fey. She is a New York banker something's wife. She started life as a stewardess, a flight attendant who assisted him and then took him from his first wife. And so now her entire world is being the kept woman. So you have Martin Short, who is her plastic surgeon, who's had so much plastic surgery. His name is Goldstein, but he pronounces it Framp. And she goes in and she's like, okay, Dr. Framp, today I need to talk about my toes for sex reasons. It's ridiculous. Like, and rather waiting for the anesthesia to take effect, would you like to watch some DIY, some HGTV, or some pornography? It is ridiculous. It is the dumbest show that I have ever seen in my life. I love it.
Sounds like.
So, how have you been, Precious?
I've been okay. We're at war. Yay.
Yay. I woke up We dropped some bombs. I'm sure it was fully authorized. Totally
Right.
sure there was lots of communication. There's a clear objective, a nice end goal. This is going to be a small, contained issue. Because as we know historically, us involving ourselves in the Middle East is usually a very clean in and out process. It's,
Right.
yeah, never, there's always
Yeah.
the mint left on the pillow. It's a done transaction. No lingering issues for decades. Nothing.
Nope. So
Today, mhm,
I went to a psychic fair
mm,
called the Blackstock Psychic Fair. Now, I didn't know what
okay,
Blackstock was until I got there. And it's a bar. And it's a bar that's Halloween themed. I mean,
okay,
one of the drinks you can get is in an IV pole, is in an IV bag on an IV pole that you can carry around with you.
okay, okay.
So very Friday the 13th weird thing. I had a great hot chocolate there though. I'm not going to complain. It was really good. But I went because they are very choosy about their readers and you have to
Hmm.
audition. And so I went to audition and nothing makes Dia more nervous than that first read at any
Yeah.
psychic fair. That first reading at a psychic fair, OMG, is so difficult because you haven't read in a while and then
Hmm.
you worry that maybe you lost it somehow, which is stupid, but that's what you think. And
Uh-huh.
so I'm sitting there going, and then I got this feeling because usually I do love, family, and money or a career. And
Hmm.
there was nothing coming from money. And what I hear very clearly is he doesn't give an S about money. And I don't say things like that out loud. So I was like, I normally pull about career, but clearly you don't. And he goes, give an S about money. And I said, yes,
Yeah.
that's exactly what I heard. As a matter of fact, he was like, yeah, I don't give an S about money. I was like, okay, then I'm not going to read about that. So, but anyway, he said that I was professional and spot on. And he was very pleased. And he was like, nothing, this is exactly what I expect from someone coming in who clearly has been practicing for a long time. But the cute thing is I have on these little jars
Hmm.
that I got from Spellbound Intentions. And I went back there and she gave them to me. I bought them and she was like, so put these out at the full moon, okay? And they'll get all that good full moon energy. And I went, yeah, that's a great idea. And I didn't know how to say, I didn't know how to say, I know that. So eventually I said, hey, Caitlin. And she goes, yeah. And I said, I'm in Caitlin's coven. And she went, are you the high priestess? And I said, yes. And she goes, oh my God. I was like, it's okay. I didn't know what to say. So I just went along
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, living on the West Coast every day, Dia, I am given the benefit of somebody coming into the store and telling me the healing benefit of something, like a crystal. It's like, do you have a little bit of hematite? And I'm like, it is a safe bet that Kyler has some hematite on him. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It gets to a point where like I don't. I've been doing this long enough. I don't need to put on airs. It's not an ego thing for me. So I'm just
right.
like, "Oh, thank you. That's a great piece
Thank
of
you.
advice."
That's a great idea. Yeah.
And then I'm
So,
going to go home to my collection of nuggets of hematite. They're like all over the place. And I'm like, somebody talked about you, my pretties.
well, the other thing that I always worry about happened to me at this psychic fair as well. I walked in and someone went, Dia. And I go, hi. And I have no clue to this day how I know them, where I know them from. They talked to me about a lot of things. I couldn't figure it out how I knew them. I really could not. It was, and y'all have to, people forget that I have brain damage, and I mean that sincerely. I had a B12 deficiency that led to what they thought was a stroke. That's how bad it was. So I have brain damage, and so my memory is shot. And so I end up going, hello. Now his wife she was like, hey, and gave me her name and shook my hand and said, it's so good to see you again. And it was clear she understood that I had no clue who they were. Like, she clearly knew this and was trying to ease back into, like, why we know each other. But I bought this from them.
Oh.
Which is a dragon with storm agate wings. And they were Soulful Stones is the name of their group. Their little company that they go around to psychic fairs and sell stones. And they had some really pretty ones. I love that there's two things already that I love about today's podcast, because Dia has brought to the table some facets of herself that I adore. One, the fact that she goes into every public encounter like somebody who has warrants. It's like, who am I going to see here? How are they going to recognize me? Will this lead to a police chase? And then as a Southerner, every now and then there is a phrase, usually a repetitive consonant sound, that your brain says, nope, and then takes a poo down the back of your neck, and you just can't get it out. And you have to, like, sound it out. You have to use your words. Here in the Pacific Northwest, I thought I was going to be doing good because I come from Florida, where everything has, like, a First Nations or Native name, right? I'm like, okay, I get out here, it's a completely different phonetic base. I can't pronounce any of the place names here. People look at me like, oh, you're a tourist. I'm like, I've lived here for 4 years. Leave me alone. I can't help it. It's a disability. I'm Southern. All right. Like, the words are right in my head, and then they try to come out of my mouth hole and they're sad. Like, leave me alone. Let me live my life. Well, and the sad thing about this that will make you laugh even more is that the little jars that I bought were blue lace agate, which are for communication, which is why I have them all right now. So, yay.
Irony is better than saffron as a spice, y'all. I love it. It makes life nummy.
So that's what else is going on. Oh, I'm working on a new LARP costume. That's taking up. Oh, I have a bone to pick with you. Just
okay,
one.
What I do. Okay.
So I'm working on this new LARP outfit, and I'm making up the pattern. And
I know. Okay.
He knows where this is going. And I decide that I need to do something because the dress form I have is too small for me. And so Kyler suggested that I saran wrap my body and then duct tape it and then cut that off, stuff the form that comes out of the duct taping process, and then use that and make that my dress form. And so I did. And I did this twice. And the first time we did it wrong. Tony and I did it together. It was not pretty. It didn't look like anything but a big blob. And so we had to do it again. So we did it again. And then we took it off. And we were excited because this time we did it right. And you could see boobs and things like that. But the other thing you could see is every roll of fat that I have on my body. It was demoralizing. I looked at that and went, that is me? That is me? I don't know. No. And I was so depressed. I was like walking around going, I'm just fat and ugly now. That's great. Yay. And all because Kyler suggested I make my own dress form.
I want to be very clear. Okay, I want to be clear to all of our listeners. This is a poor man's dress form. This technique has been used to good avail for by many a maker. Okay, I forgot to put the caveat in there that if you don't know what you look like in 3D, you will be informed. Yes, I'm sorry, Leah. I hope that
Well,
I have not irreparably damaged our friendship.
no, the good news is I'm dating someone new, and it just so happened that he gave me a big compliment about my body, and I was like, okay, maybe it's not that bad.
Yeah.
So, when the new person you're dating thinks you're hot, then you're like, okay, well, it's not so bad. So
Seriously, I am never a proponent for somebody needing somebody else to like constantly validate them. However, every now and then when a hottie says, and you feel that down in your soul, like when you wear the that feels good.
yeah, it
Everybody
did feel
needs
good.
that from time to time, you know? Mm-hmm.
It did feel good. So
Yeah.
that's my bone to pick with you. Do you have any bones to pick other than the fact that we're at war? Outside of that,
See, I wasn't even going to go in that direction, and you brought it back up. You indexed me. You know how my brain works. You indexed me back to the incomparable amount of rage living inside of me. Right now is an interesting time. We're kind of in between. We have a friend who's going to be moving from Florida out here in May. A really good friend came out for a week vacation. Has been wanting to move to the Pacific Northwest since I think they were in high school. And it was so comfortable. Like, we're really looking forward to having this person as a roommate. What was funny is one of our friends said that when they're around, they've never seen Chris act the way he does. And I'm like, you mean like a big, goofy, goofball dork man? Like, because that's who my husband is. Like, the quiet, introspective, doesn't miss anything psychologist. That's his public, I'm norming, I have a little bit of autism face. You got to see big, happy, dumb dork man Chris, who bounces around and sometimes gets the zoomies. And this friend, he's so comfortable with this friend that it's almost like a paladin in D&D, because we got to go there. There's this aura that happens. There's this buff to his emotional constitution. And for a week, I knew what it was like to be ganged up on, because they both get the zoomies, they both get over stimulated, and they feed each other. And so, like, and also we're going around, we're doing all these tourist things. Chris has a wing and a sling, so I drove everywhere. Now, I like to drive. Like, Chris is usually the navigator, because with my ADHD, I'm not a good navigator. I get distracted by birds and grass and trees and thoughts and whispers and just all kinds of fun stuff. I'm not a good navigator. I am a terrible passenger princess, but I am a great long haul driver. I will sometimes miss exits, because there's that exit. That car reminded me of something I saw in 1987, and it's a thing. But I'm describing myself as a very dangerous driver. I'm very safe. I haven't had an accident that's at my fault, like, ever. So anyway, I was so done with driving that I almost called it to work, because I didn't want to drive to work. Like, I didn't have a problem with work. I just didn't want to drive to work. But I did go. I was good. Things with my mom and niece are doing really well. All in all, my life is full of blessings right now. Like, I don't have anything that is anywhere close to not being a first world problem. And so, like, those are all quite manageable. I am definitely living with the existential WTF of what is going on right now.
Yeah.
And it has led to some really great, difficult, awesome, painful conversations, specifically with the people of color in my life, about, like, where this country is, who we are, who we've always been. And I've had to be very selective about the news media that I engage with, or I want to just throw things, because, you know, as we do, you know, like, apparently it's the American reflex to just start throwing things, chairs, vases, bombs, whatever. We, you know, it's a thing. And hey, for the low price of getting your president out of Hawk, you too could be purchased by the Saudis. That'll be great. I have no words. That's not true. I have lots of words, but they will get beeped, and Dio will get carpal tunnel from pressing the beep button, and then I'll get in trouble, and she'll have another bone to pick with me. So, so that's basically what's happening in my life. I am writing again.
Good job.
I'm writing like a lot. Like I put down 12,000 words in a day. Like the story is one I've been working on for a really long time, and I have made myself the promise that once, even if it's just once, I'm going to get a book to send to a publisher status. I don't super even care if it ever gets published. I mean, I do, seriously, we all do. But I'm going to finish one novel if it kills me, or possibly Chris's Patience. I don't know. I have a feeling one of those is going to get out first. But that is what I've been working on. It's been very rewarding.
That's awesome. Yeah. So what are we talking about today?
So today we're talking about something which as a topic, I absolutely love. The term that I have always used, because this is what I got from Poppy, is crossing the hedge. Now, that is not the most common term for it. It is a fairly common term from what I understand. But crossing the hedge or hedge writing is the process of stepping from this world to the other world. All right. And I think probably for the purposes of this podcast, the other world is probably just the easiest shorthand, because there's lots of other worlds. There's lots of different facets and levels and planes and all of that you can go to as a practitioner. But it was one of the very first conversations she and I ever had. And it was one of the things that I have trained in fairly extensively, because that's where a lot of my perspective comes from. And it's something that I don't think we've talked about at all on the podcast.
No. And the other, I've always called it crossing the veil. Mm-hmm. Which is another way of saying that. But I also think sometimes crossing the veil is more specific. That's the word I'm looking for. It's more specific. Crossing the veil is more specific. But once you brought up this term, I was like, oh yeah, that kind of encompasses all the things, all the places you can go. And on the woo scale today, we're going to be like at a 6 or 7 today.
Oh, yeah.
This is a high woo topic, that not everybody will believe in. That's okay. You don't have to believe in it. Listen to Kyler and I laugh through it. So,
yeah, I mean, we're going to do that regardless. So,
yes, yeah.
Oh, there is one other thing in my life, because this is very important, and it in no way, shape, or form relates at all to crossing the hedge. I have finally won the hat wars. I have decided what hat I like. I have tried to find headwear to shape my big, round, bow-looking head for my entire life. I don't look good in baseball caps. I don't look good in cowboy hats. Nothing. For some reason, I have achieved the aged uncle look. I got the white and the beard. I feel like I can pull off the flat cap. And that I have purchased a half dozen of them. I now am a flat cap wearer, and this is the hat I wear. And this is a substantial gain in my life, because I have hated every piece of headwear, and I am bald in a state with high UV. So it was a thing.
That's awesome. I noticed the hat, and I liked it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people who are bald don't want you to talk about the hat.
I have accepted the fact that on a sunny day, you can see my skull from space. I have accepted that. She's shiny, she's bright, she's very pale. She's prone to turning rosy pink. Anyway, the hat does not help crossing the hedge. What does help crossing the hedge, though, in this topic, because of the potential for problems, I wanted to take a kind of more structured approach than we sometimes do. There are definitely some points that we want to make sure we hit today, just because when you are kind of leaving your space or going in to go out, when you're crossing that hedge, there are going to be a lot of people who say, well, as long as, you believe and all this, everything's going to be hunky-dory, everything's going to be fine. The world is full of perils that are not evil, they're not bad, they don't mean you harm, but If you're a gazelle, there are lions. I mean, it's the natural ecology of things. Also, there are things that your mind is not ready to engage with.
Right.
And forcing an awareness before you are ready for it can be a problem. Now, to this purpose, I definitely want to spend some time talking about the safety and ethics of everything. So don't let me forget that, because I'm only halfway through my coffee and I probably will get on a tangent at some point and forget, but we definitely need to revisit that.
And what do you mean when you talk about ethics of crossing the veil or crossing the hedge?
So ethics is this big, wide, dirigible balloon of a thing in the craft. We do not have a 10 Commandments. We don't have a list of set rules. What we have is a code of personal responsibility, and it is left up to each person to figure out what their ethics are, what their moral compass is. So if you, for instance, if you are a talented dreamer, some people call it dream walking, what stops you from visiting someone else's dreams? What stops you from communicating with them, from, I guess, in essence, spying on them? The government saw so much potential in this. We had programs like MK Ultra, right? Like the ability to utilize those gifts that are human, we'll call them extrasensory. I mean, kings would have diviners who would try to foretell details about battles that were yet to come. If you can cross the veil, if you have access to these gifts, you have the potential to violate others' privacy. You also, if you are a modern human, you might not see the beings and the entities that you experience on the other side as having full autonomous agency. This is something like you and I've talked about a few times in the past. And like in our everyday practice, it's important, but it's much more important when you're going to deal with these entities in a place where they live. Like they're not guests coming to your house. Now you're going to their house. And so how you ethically handle yourself is really, really important. Don't show up at somebody else's house and keep your shoes on when you're supposed to take them off at the door. Like you want to be respectful, and you want to use common sense, which I wish was more common. Like just, I've seen some truly, truly amazing, astounding lapses of judgment over the years. So while this is a great big juicy topic, it's also one that I want to make sure people are approaching with the right amount of respect.
Right. And you mentioned the military, so I'm going to have to mention this. There's a book by John Ronson, The Men Who Stare at Goats. It's a nonfiction book based on actual declassified information from the military about their paranormal activities and attempts. And it was later made into a movie in 2009 that starred George Clooney, Ian McGarrigle, Jeff Bridges, and Kevin Spacey. So, Men Who Stare at Goats. And if you're interested in this, my favorite author, Fiona, with the Inquis set of books, talks about this as well, quite in great detail about paranormal, what they call remote viewing, which is going to a place and then viewing something, and how they were having 57% accuracy, which is more than chance. It's a lot more than chance would happen. Yeah. So this is not some joke. They really did this stuff. So I just wanted to bring that up and mention those titles specifically.
Yeah.
Fiona Quinn.
Fiona Quinn. There we go. I was having trouble remembering her last name. The other thing is the inherent nature of crossing the hedge. So why do we call it crossing the hedge? Well, historically in the UK, which is where a lot of like the pagan Renaissance and all that comes from, that resurgence of craft comes out of, Wicca going mainstream and all that, and Wicca and traditional witchcraft being different things. In the UK, they had a lot of pasture land. They would have miles and miles and miles of pasture land. And if you cut down trees and turn them into lumber to make fences, you wind up having to constantly rebuild those fences. Or you can take these densely growing scrubs and these plants and plant them close together so they intertwine their branches and they create fences. Those are hedgerows. So those are the fences. That's how you would keep livestock in. That's how you would keep cattle and goats and sheep and all that fun stuff in old UK. And it's not just the UK, but that's where it's most commonly recognized. So crossing the hedge becomes a metaphor for boundary crossing. Now, here's the nature. We're going to go a little esoteric, a little intrinsic versus extrinsic with it. A boundary is a boundary because by definition, it keeps two things separate. What happens when the boundary is constantly permeated? Over time, that boundary weakens. Now, you going between here and there is not going to weaken the boundary between worlds. It is going to weaken the boundary that you perceive inside yourself. We are creatures of definition and boundary, good and evil, light and dark, up and down. We are contrast beings. That is how we kind of echolocate ourselves in the universe. So the more you spend time on the other side, the more it will functionally and foundationally change who you are. And that's not a bad thing, as long as you're being, respectful and common sensey with it. But there are practitioners that I've had the opportunity to meet in this life who have spent so much time not here. They're never fully here again. They're always 1 foot in the other world. They are in constant communication, and not everybody's life benefits from that. Now, in this day and age, practitioners specifically, like it's an American ego thing, there's nothing that we think we can't handle. The number of students that I have had who want to dive headfirst into this topic with wild and crazy abandon, it is kind of staggering, because think about the ramifications of going too far too fast. This topic brings up all kinds of like hot button words. One of those is gatekeeping. Gatekeeping has become a 4-letter word in the information age. If you're gatekeeping information, everyone has right to access information. I agree. Information purely for itself should be free for everyone. However, you can read a textbook on how to do an emergency tracheotomy, which ironically enough, this is a conversation I just had with my mother driving to a mountain the other day, and she feels she is prepared to give an emergency tracheotomy in a situation. And I'm like, not on me, let me suffocate. But certain actions based on that information should be gatekept. When you are dealing with something that fundamentally changes who you are, you shouldn't try to chew the whole pie all at once. You have to go at it systematically. Otherwise, there could be very serious consequences and ramifications. So like all in all, like I hate the concept of gatekeeping, but at the same time, there is this tiny bit of my soul, this little portion that recognizes some things do need to be a bit gatekept, because otherwise people may hurt themselves. It's
right. When you do crossing the hedge on a regular basis without a foundation of safety and a deep understanding of your ego, you lose sight of what is real and what is not. And it's not a pretty thing to watch. I mean, it will, I've seen it make some people insane, like literally crazy, because they can't identify what is real and what is in their head. We all have fears in our lives that manifest in some way. If we don't understand that, and I'm going to use the term grok, we don't really understand ourselves, then we can easily fall prey into, I'm feeling every minute of every day, I'm feeling something from the other side. I'm feeling something from the other side. I'm feeling something. Okay. Maybe you need to shut that shit down.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like it's kind of like the same effect of being on social media 24/7. Not healthy for you. It's just not healthy for you. And so if that's something that you're doing on a regular basis, then you aren't healthy. There's something missing. I always think about the High Priestess card. In the High Priestess card, she stands usually between dark and light, but it's a metaphor for standing between the worlds with one foot in reality. Mm-hmm. She has one foot in reality and then the other foot in the other worlds. But she has a foot in reality. You can't consider yourself, in my opinion, a high priestess if you aren't connected to reality, sincerely. Like, and I don't think that's gatekeeping. I think that's just common sense, right? Like, you still have to be able to pay your bills and interact with people and have control, right? Being out of control is not a sign of your power. It's a sign of a lack of power, in my opinion.
Yes. Well, I mean, I'm glad that you brought up the High Priestess card, because I've always viewed her as a mediator between the incorporeal and the corporeal. She is the sieve. She's the crucible that mediates and forms the knowledge of the other side and makes it usable in this. She is the wisdom that comes from that. Now, remember, wisdom is not knowledge. Wisdom is the ability to use what you get in some kind of creative way. Being able to swim in the ocean of the other world doesn't mean bupkis if you can't bring something good and tangible back. Tangible was the word I was looking for just a minute ago. She's the mediator between the intangible and the tangible. She's the avenue of that. And so often I see people who go forward too fast, and being able to do a thing isn't the arbiter of success. Knowing when you should and shouldn't, and being able to do it with care and grace and specificity. If you have a talent that you cannot control, that is a danger, at least to yourself. So I don't want to be too like doom and gloom about it, because in all the years that I've practiced, I've never come across something that wanted to chew me up and spit me out. But I have gone deep enough that I've come back different. And if you haven't engaged in your own therapy and your own mental health journey, and you don't know what's lurking inside your psyche, that's going to be a problem, because the deeper you go, the more yourself is reflected back at you, and you have to pass through that. And the deeper the level of yourself you go, the deeper into this other place you can be, but you're still passing through that reflective membrane. And anybody who's ever spent some time on the astral, like what's inside of you gets reflected back. Like that, the material of that place is psychoreactive, and it will build your fears, your fantasies all around you. And it can seriously skew the information, the wisdom, the message that you get from the other side. So yeah, that's the caveat I wanted to put on everything. But I think more than anything, this is a foundational skill that I think a lot of modern practitioners, I'm not going to say are lacking, but it's not given enough reverence, enough focus, because like in my practice, I am entity, not energy based. So going to this place, being able to more firmly communicate with these beings, that is how my practice works. So if I can't go and talk to them, I mean, that's at best some kind of long distance thing. I'm a terrible pen pal. So like I find this has become like a cornerstone of my practice.
What are some other names? I was just sitting here thinking of, of crossing the hedge. And one of the names is astral projection. Mm-hmm. That's a type of crossing the hedge. Now, before you say that's bupkis, so let me tell you the story about Dick Sells. So he I had become his student. I'm in my little cottage. I turn from the living room down this hallway where the kitchen's on the right, the bathroom's on the right, and at the end of the hall is my bedroom. And so I turn down the hallway, and there is Dixelle standing there with a staff. And I'm like, okay, he's a little shimmery looking. It's a little odd. And I said, what are you doing? And he said, checking on you. And I said, I didn't invite you. And he said, you're my student. And so I went into the other room, got a staff, and ran him through. Because I was pissed. Don't just show up in my house. Like, that is not cool. And then the phone rang. And I picked it up, and Dixelle said, why did you do that? And I said, do what? And he said, run me through with a staff. So in that moment, I was like, oh, wow, that was real. Like, I didn't make that up in my head. Had he not called me, I probably would have convinced myself that I imagined it. But the fact that he called me the minute I ran him through and said, if he did it perfectly, why did you do that? Do what? Run me through with a staff. There's no way he could have known that. I was still holding the staff in my hand when I answered the phone. And this is back before cell phones, y'all. So this was a landline that was ringing. So yeah, long cord, the whole 9 yards. Yeah. So yes, after that, I was like, oh wow, astral projection is real. And I don't know that I want to do that. Now I have, but I've done it with permission. Mm-hmm. I've done it usually in defense of others, or when I want to see some, especially students, I want to go and see where they live and the energy of where they live and how that works out, because a lot of my students are long distance. And so I want to check in on that and feel that energy in their home. And the only way to do that is astral projection when they live 5 states away. So, so I do use that as a tool, but it's very infrequently. And it is not something that, it's not the first thing I turn to. The first thing I turn to is going, hey, how are you?
Yeah. The magical and the mundane, it's a thing.
It's a thing, right? Just, how are you today? I'm worried about you. Tell me about what's going on.
General empathy does not require high woo. It's there. No. It's accessible to everybody, even the lay person. It's a thing. Like I remember when Poppy and I first started playing around with, I say playing around, Poppy's lessons were a scattershot across the board. And I say lessons when they were really just discussions. Like, I don't know that she ever even thought of the teacher-student relationship as a formal thing between the two of us. We were just besties. But we decided we were going to play a game, and we were going to meet up, and we would see what information we could pull from the space the other one would create. And so we did dream incubation, we did astral projection, all that fun stuff. And there was this little pizza place. It's called Leonardo's by the Slice. They had the Big Leo, phenomenal deep dish pizza. And they would bring out these garlic knots that were literally this deep in a bowl of garlic butter. Mm-hmm. Like, this was arteriosclerosis in a bowl. Okay. Mm-hmm. Good. And Poppy, who was a raging diabetic, should not have loved these as much as she did. But she did. First time Berto and I took her to Leonardo's by the Slice, she sees this bowl of garlic knots, and she says, "I just want to pour them all over my chest." Like, that was the kind of that was the kind of vivacious little lady she was. And we had been there once. At this point, it had been almost a year before. I had not thought of Leonardo's for a while, and I have this dream where we're sitting there and we're having a conversation about what's going on in our lives. And I wake up and I call her up, and I had honestly, I'm not even gonna lie, I had forgotten what the goal was because we had very loose, very informal. I called her up the next day. I'm like, I had the funniest dream, and she's like, "How was the pizza?" And I was like, "Oh, I see what you did there. Oh, that was good. That was very good." We had been in the same place, and we even remembered the conversation that we had had, and it was. At that moment, it was probably one of the things that really cemented me in my own confidence, my faith in my own practice, because it was something tangible. It wasn't just, oh, he might be slightly strange, like his cheese has slid ever so slightly off his cracker. Not going to say that's not the case, but that was definitely one of those moments. And I think when we use terms like astral projection, it can sometimes create this kind of woo-woo resistance. Like astral projection is such like a term of the 60s. Like it's kind of associated with like the flower wearing, lavender wearing kind of hippie movement, that we don't think of it as the tool of what it is. Like ancient peoples, ancient practitioners, they had a concept of this. They may have called it something different, but one of the cornerstones of every indigenous pagan practice was crossing the boundary between worlds. They were intercessors in the world of the spirit. And that's one of those foundational skills.
I agree. Astral projection, I think, has a weird connotation to it now, but I always view it like New Agey people call it astral projection. Witches call it crossing the veil or over the hedge. And astral projection is for New Age people, but it was the only way to explain what Dick Sells did. And I've never trained on crossing into other people's dreams. Actually, I've never trained in that. Mostly because I have enough trouble interpreting my own dreams. I don't really want to get involved in other people's dreams. If you bring me a dream and tell me about it, I can tell you what it means. But I don't want to get involved in actually being in that dream. That's a whole lot of work, and I don't know. I'll take that as a no. One of the other things that I do sometimes, and I don't know if you would consider this crossing the hedge or not, but there is a belief that in any given moment, you can take a turn from a different phrase that you're about to say to some other phrase. If you're in a car, every turn you come to is a turn you could have taken. And so sometimes I will be driving, and driving can be very trance-inducing, and I will suddenly in front of me kind of see into that alternate universe where I took that turn when I didn't take the turn. And I always have to reground and bring myself back into that. But for me, that's looking into the alternate universes that are available to us, that we could experience. And this is a great skill if you want to play out, what if I did X? So you think about X, you act in your brain as if you've done X, and then you play out what happens when you do X. And this helps you experience the thing without doing the thing. And that can be very helpful when you're thinking about doing a magical working, for example. And you need to play in your mind how that is. Well, nothing's better than going over the hedge into the future and seeing how that plays out for yourself. I think that people who do medium work and straight out just, I don't want to say psychic, but seership work, where it's not really about the cards. They're actually getting information from the other side, which is how I read, right? The guy I read for at the psychic fair was really confused because I wasn't talking about the cards. And then afterwards, I was like, oh, I got the cards because I was scaring people. And so I don't know what they mean. They're just, they're pretty and they're here. And that's what they're for. But I get that information direct from the other side, but that's a skill to not lose myself in that. And it's a skill to understand when that is not ego, when I am not influenced by the presentation of the human being in front of me, when I'm not influenced by something I overheard before they sat down, when I'm not influenced by, knowing when I'm being influenced by the other side versus when I'm being influenced by my ego. And we've talked about this before. I can't impress upon you how important it is. It is so important to understand your ego and know when your ego is at play. My first degrees and I just had this talk about the amygdala and the idea that the amygdala is where psychic ability comes from. But the amygdala is also where fright, flight, freeze, and fawn come from.
Southern.
It's same place. The same place, right? So your intuition is coming from the same place that your fight, fright, flight, freeze, fawn, whatever comes from. That's an important thing to understand because those energies are very similar and can easily be mistaken for one another if you don't practice and understand that that's what it is.
I think, and I love that this topic, I had a feeling we might kind of get into this kind of like splay out, scattershot kind of web thing, because this touches so many aspects of a practitioner's life.
Right.
Because ultimately what you are doing is that the mundane world places on our minds, our perceptions. So like earlier you were talking about, forecasting going right versus going left, which immediately takes the conversation to like an 8 or a 9 in the woo scale. Just broaching that topic, we pop up into another zip code there. But I mean, that's the thing. As a medium, as a gifted sensitive, you have access to that. To an extent, I do, but I don't think I have access to it as much because I haven't trained myself to do it in the same way that you have. There are some people who, like, as an artist, I am very good with form and precision of perspective. I struggle sometimes with color. We all have these natural proclivities when we engage in this. I had a student who, if she wasn't careful, would slip left of reality.
Yeah.
Like, she would tumble 90 degrees from where everybody else was, and you'd have to grab her and pull her back in. It got to the point where the deity she was working with, this is going to be a high woo statement, the deity she was working with just stuck her in place because she had to learn how to keep herself in place. And it was like, I'd never actually seen somebody with that problem before, but it opened my eyes. I think the prospect of engaging with ourselves, and you and I've talked about this before, I didn't think of myself as quote unquote psychic. I didn't think of myself as quote unquote sensitive. I have always been a charismatic person. I felt that I was a more projective person and not so receptive. Our friendship has actually helped me to realize, no, I pick up on a lot of things. I pick up on a lot of things. I just wasn't giving myself credit for it. And then I love that we come back to ego on this because most people do not understand what ego is. Ego is necessary. It is a healthy ego is necessary for you to live in this world and be an effective human being. It's necessary for you to traipse through the other world and be an effective human being that brings all of you back. An unhealthy ego, which frankly right now we are seeing in display all across our country, is reactive. It loses its sense of presence. It loses its foundation. It reacts to outside stimuli without maintaining its own anchored self. It is not sovereign. When I say sovereign, a sovereign nation is a nation capable of defending itself, capable of holding itself in peace. If you are not sovereign in yourself, your ego is out of control. That is when you act without having all the relevant facts. That's when you throw yourself headlong into things you're not ready for. That's when you ignore red flags. How many times have we been in relationships we would have avoided if we would have stopped and paid attention to the red flags? The part of us that recognizes danger, the part of us that can talk to the other places, they come from the primal part of us. That is why that comes from the same place as, I'm going to try it now, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. I've been practicing
Show
it
off.
in my head. I am utilizing all of those speech lessons from when I was a kid. I used to say the word yayo instead of yellow. So I had to go for some speech therapy. It's like pulling things out of the old toolkit. But I mean, that's the thing. It's like we as practitioners have access to, I don't want this to sound arrogant. I don't want it to sound overly woo. We have way more colors in our palette.
Right.
We live in a world of such incredible, dynamic, nuanced beauty. It is the difference between almost like a black and white image to 4K saturation. And I don't know how, well, just for shitsies and giggles, we'll call them muggles. I don't know how the mundane muggles of the world live in the bubble that they do, because I haven't been there in so long. I've lost reference for that.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of that is because I've crossed those boundaries. And it's a coming back to oneself. The more you release the constraint of those boundaries, it brings you back to a deeper, more pure version of yourself. Because as children, we can do this super easily.
And that is exactly where I wanted to go with this conversation. I've talked before about Samuel, my son, as a young child, just going up to adults and speaking truths like that he should know about, that he didn't even understand the context or even what he was saying. The words didn't make sense to him. He was so little. He was 2. Mm-hmm. And he was just spouting off things. He walked up to this one woman and went, "Oh, you're from Atlantis." And she was like, "How did you know that?" She had done a past life regression and believed she was from Atlantis. There is no reason for my 2-year-old son to have known that about a complete stranger. And
mm-hmm.
and I think that some of our children, if you have a child that just spurts off truths at people, like, and it's a mic drop situation, they go, "Hey, yeah, it's because you're afraid of blah, 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 blah," mic drop, and then walks off. Those kids are getting that from the ether. They're getting it from the other side of the hedge. They just don't know that yet. They just haven't come up with that understanding. And those are the kids that really need some spiritual grounding and centering and discussion about how they're doing it, why they're doing it, and how they can keep safe, and also how they can stop maybe smacking people around with their words mm-hmm. when it maybe doesn't need to be done. So that was that. And then I was going to say, the other thing I want to say is, if you've been in ritual where you felt the energy, you've been over the hedge.
Mm-hmm.
You've been over the hedge. I'm going to say this again. When you've been in ritual and you have felt the energy, you have been over the hedge. Why is this important? Because the same people who can feel the energy in ritual and go over the hedge in ritual will come to me and say, "I can't do it." But they are doing it. And once you've done it once, you should be able to follow that feeling back. So don't believe, if you believe that you are, somehow Muggle bound and you don't have any intuition, then I ask you, have you been in ritual and felt the energy? Because if you have, you've been over the hedge, period.
Mm-hmm.
And you should be able to follow that energy back over the hedge when you need to. Not necessarily all the time, but when you need to, right?
Right. I mean, you really don't need to live over there, because living over there is not going to pay your rent. It's not going to get your dividends done. it's a wonderful thing to expand our consciousness, to exist in these altered states, to be able to go to these places. And it's a really good idea if you do have a child that is pulling this energy. It's a good idea to teach them when to, like, kind of how to control it, how to throttle down on it, because you'll terrify people. A fun story. I have a niece who is one of my all-time favorite humans. She is tiny, and she is hilarious, and she is overly sarcastic, and it's like a little splinter of my soul just hived off and made her. She is also incredibly gifted, and her dad, unlike her, does not like scary movies. He does not like ghosts. He does not like things that go bump in the night. He is a former military. He is very linear, and he is about as Muggle bound, since that's going to be a term for us now, as you can, because I love that, by the way, as you can get. One day, she's like 3 or 4. She's in the bathtub, and she's kind of in there by herself for just a second. Still at that age, not sure of her age, but it's still at the age where you don't leave her alone in the bathtub by herself, right? For too terribly long. So he steps out to go get a towel or something. And when he comes back in, he's standing in the door, and she starts having a conversation about the lady who's standing behind him, which immediately makes the hackles on his neck go up, because there's no lady standing behind him. And he's like, who do you mean? And she starts describing this lady. He was partially raised by a grandmother who had passed away. She has never seen a picture of this person. Described her down to the pearl necklace she wore.
Mm-hmm.
He walked away from the room and said, your daughter needs you, to my sister, went into the bedroom, closed the door, and did not come out for several hours. And if we're being honest, it's not because he was overcome with emotion. It was because, holy shite, there was a ghost. There was a something. Freaked him completely out. The truth can be one of the most dangerous weapons that you can use. This is a conversation I have had with my very southern, very passive many, many times. There is the truth, and then there is weaponized truth. And sometimes even non-weaponized truth hits like a thermonuclear warhead. Like, you have to be careful. Just because you're ready for something doesn't mean the people around you are ready. And I swear, for truly gifted practitioners of the divinatory arts, the biggest lesson they have to learn is when to open their mouth and when to keep them shut. Because most people don't want to hear what you can lay down on that table.
The other thing I have called our gift in our family has been truth seeing. Mm-hmm. And that's because ultimately that's what you're doing when you're doing divination. People who think that divination is just about the future are missing a portion of what's available to them. And that's the truth. And you need to judiciously use the truth, because not everybody can have it. I don't know if I've ever told this story, but I got well known for being a psychic, and this woman came to me and said, will you please tell me what gender my baby's going to be? And this is before imaging was such that it is today. And there was still an art to that. And so I put my hand on her belly and saw her child dead. So now what do you do? Right? And I blew it off and said, I'm just having an off day. I can't really get a good read. I'm sorry. And the next time I ran into that girl's husband was as he was coming out of the hospital when she delivered the child dead. And he stopped me and started screaming that I was a witch and that I had cursed his wife. So you need to be careful. You don't know when these situations are going to arise, and unless you've dealt with them or thought about them or formulated a plan, what are you going to do? Like telling her, and what I tried to explain to the husband was telling her her baby was going to die served no purpose.
Right.
It served no purpose. And there was always the chance that I was wrong. Mm-hmm. So what good would anything I had to say do for her or do for you? You wouldn't have believed me. Or mm-hmm. if you did believe me, you would have been, anxious the whole time, and maybe telling you is what causes the baby to die. So right. There was nothing I could say, literally nothing I could say that would make that situation improved. Mm-hmm. And so saying nothing at all was the better choice. He did eventually calm down. He still said I was a witch and had cursed his wife, but I think he did listen to what I had to say. And I hope that someday he kind of became, because he was a pagan practitioner. So I hope someday he understood that that's not what was happening. That just because right. someone sees something does not a cause and effect.
Right.
People who have the gift, it's not cause and effect. They're seeing what is mm-hmm. happening, and they're reporting on that. That is why the whole Shakespearean, who was it? Cassandra mm-hmm. in Shakespeare is a gifted seer and no one believes her. And, that's a real thing that happens.
It is. Well, that actually comes out of Greek myth, and Shakespeare repackaged it. The Cassandra mm-hmm. conundrum is you are such a gifted seer, but your gift is so strong, you see the most probable outcome, and so you have very little chance of actually changing anything. That was her curse. And what you're describing, and this is something that I love that we got into this. I call it the into the woods paradox. People want to know things, but when things go bad, people need to blame people. Meryl Streep's character in Into the Woods is a perfect example of this. The whole song, Blame the Witch. And she mm-hmm. takes herself out of the equation. She just goes into the ground. Done. Blame the witch. The people in Into the Woods behaved in absolutely horrible ways. And somehow, even though they behaved in absolutely horrible ways, it was the witch's fault.
Right.
A witch intercedes on behalf of other people. A witch is a practitioner. They are people. They are not out there doing all of these things willy-nilly. Because if you are a practitioner with any actual capacity to do anything, you understand cause and effect probably a hell of a lot more than the average person. Because you see how things are put together. When you take the blinders off of your eyes, you see how interconnected things are. Everybody at my work and in my private life, they say, you're such a nice person. I really am not. I'm a fairly neutral person, but I know how things work. I try to cause as little damage as I can around me. And I call it constant gardening. I am constantly kind of tending the people around me. I give them little compliments. I give them affection. I give them attention that I know that they are woefully lacking everywhere else in their lives. People are going to be like, well, this is really nice. You're a nice person. When they're happy, I'm happy. When everybody's happy, when a community is happy, we're all happier together. It's inherently self-serving. Now, yes, is it nice? Sure. But it's also inherently self-serving. I'm actually a pretty cantankerous, grumpy human being. Like, I just enjoy being happier. So I work against that default by being who I am with all the people around me. I understand cause and effect. It's also like when you're dealing with divination. You talk about, do you go left, do you go right? When you are divining the future, you are seeing possible outcomes. What you are seeing is a screenshot in a documentary. You are seeing glimpses. You are at most seeing 30 frames out of a whole motion picture. That is why, and I have this conversation with my mother about the Book of Revelations and all that all the time, I don't trust prophecy. I inherently do not trust prophecy. It's not that I don't believe that the words could be true. I believe that the perspective and the context of those words will not be understood until you're right smack in that moment, and even then only about 50%. Because I have seen enough of the future. I've seen enough of the past. I've seen deep enough inside myself that I know on my clearest, truest, purest day, I'm going to get something wrong. The rose or the brown coloring on my glasses is going to shift the spectrum of the image that I'm seeing. And knowing that is a sign of a healthy ego. It's keeping yourself in check. You know, nothing good would have come from you sharing the news about that baby.
Mm-mm.
Nothing good. And, you know, as Nietzsche said, when you stare into the abyss looks back. You saw the future with that child. And that's something you chose to carry in your heart and try to spare someone else that pain. That pain was coming for them. There was a good chance that pain was coming for them. But they didn't. They got to live with hope a little bit longer.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And I know I've told the story before about the walking into a room where the querent was hysterical and the person who was doing the reading was just eating it up and loved every second of it and loved that they made them cry and made them scared and told me story after story about, well, I did this reading and this guy was so scared of me, he jumped out of his chair and ran off. And I'm like, that is not that's not the compliment you think it is. It's not. What that tells me is you're vicious and you're not nice. That's what it tells me. And it tells me that in your soul, you have no compassion. Because if you did, you would be careful about how you wield the future and wield what you can see and wield what you know. When I gave my reading to the gentleman who was interviewing me, I was very, one of the things I do is talk slower when I'm reading. And I talk slower because I'm very carefully weighing my words. How am I going to present something? How am I going to say something? One of the things that I asked him was, after I pulled a few cards, I went, "Oh, you're poly." And he sat up and he goes, "Well, in theory, but not in practice currently." But I knew then that the reason that was important to me was that I was in touch with him. Now I know I'm on the right frequency and I can have a little bit more clarity and a little more ability to feel like I'm going in the right direction with the right person. The other thing I wanted to say about this is also why I have always in my heart had the right of refusal to read someone, because I don't want to read evil people. And I have had a man come up to me and go, "I want a reading." And I looked at him and I could see it. I knew it was not good. I knew that I would read things that he didn't want me to see and that I didn't want to see. And I told him no. And he was like, and I was like, "No, I have the right of refusal. No, I'm not going to read you. Find someone else, but it's not going to be me." And I think that's really important. I also think that's a sign of a gifted, seer, because they know when they see the truth. And one of my son has told me over and over again, the truth sucks.
Oh yes, yeah. I have one. This is my cautionary tale that I don't share it super often. I tend to share it with students that I have a really close relationship with. There was someone of my acquaintance, I won't say that they were a friend because more than anything they were problematic, became involved with our group back in Florida, had been in a fraternity and had fallen in love with one of his frat brothers. Now, frat brother was a normal heterosexual male, and he was not. And he had a lot of angst about this. There was a lot of very spiky energy around this, had not settled into himself yet. Got into this very, very energy heavy dynamic like that. I never got a full read on exactly what that relationship was like, but it was not the epitome of health. And he starts getting involved with the craft, and I loan him some books, and we have some conversations, and he asks for a reading. Give him a reading. He continues to ask questions. Now, I don't tend to charge a whole lot for readings, just because I wasn't doing that as a side hustle. I was more in the role of, this is my community, and I'm farming the community and all that. He had asked so many questions that at various points I'm going through and I'm doing these readings. You're not limited to just the linear questions that you're asking. At that point, when you're doing multiple readings for the same person, you're just kind of this wide open spigot, right? And this information is coming through. And this weird thing happens with me. I don't know if this is singular to me. I'm sure somebody else out there experiences this. I teach the tarot. I have, at any given time, about 20 different decks, because I collect them. And sometimes if somebody comes along my path, I'll give them out and all that. I believe I even actually gave this young man one of my spare decks. That just, it felt like it belonged more with him, or he wanted a deck and I didn't particularly love this one, or whatever. It helps to be a pack rat. I, at some point, very much knew that this other person was not in the state of physical attraction that he wanted them to be in. And this was a truth that he could not accept. Now, he says at some point that he very clearly did not want to know that he told me not to ask that question. I have absolutely no memory of him ever saying he did not want that question asked, regardless of whatever he wanted. That information came through. I didn't have to ask it. It came through. He'd asked me for like almost a dozen readings by that point. There wasn't much about that situation I didn't already have a good handle on. So one day, he's kind of at the bottom of this depressive state, and he asks for a reading, and he's like, well, I mean, is he even gay? And I'm like, at this point, it seemed very clear to me that this person was not, and this was just wishful thinking. And I was tired. It had been the very end of a very long day. I wasn't judicious. I wasn't wise. I wasn't present. I answered the question. At that point, I became the enemy. At that point, it was blame the witch. At that point, the only reason that he spent time with me was because I literally at one point accused me of glamoring him. And I'm like, seriously? You think if I'm going to waste glamour and that amount of personal chutzpah to spend time, it's going to be with you? Because you're not always a peach to deal with. Two, I had violated his privacy. I mean, just a whole host of things. I became, and he didn't necessarily leave the community, but I was no longer the safe person. It was this whole contentious thing. He had become close with several people in the community. So I had to deal with this person on my periphery for literal years before he left. And it took the moment that he was actually out of that sphere, I breathed a sigh of relief, because he was not a safe person. Like, I don't enjoy being accused of things that I haven't done. And the problem is, in today's day and age, when you get accused of something, it's true for somebody.
Right.
And all they have to do is convince somebody that it's true, whether it is or not. And like, I know what I've done. I know the goods and the bads of my life. I've accepted and made peace with those. But the idea that I'm accused of something that I hadn't done, and it still rankles me to this day. Like, that is still, and it was because I did a reading when I shouldn't have. I was too tired. I had this belief that I had to do this service for whatever reason, and it was misplaced. I like to think that I won't do that now. I have learned that lesson, but I paid heavy coin for that lesson. And
yeah.
I hope our listeners, if you are ever out there and you're in a situation, I hope that this story comes back to you so that you don't have to pay as high a price as I did for that little piece of wisdom. If you don't actually feel comfortable doing something, don't do it. There is no onus placed on you more than what you would give yourself.
Yeah, I agree. You have to have the right to say no, and I gave myself that right really early on, when I came out in the pagan world, and I have held to that right, that I don't have to read for somebody. I don't have to read if I'm tired. I don't have to read if, the only time that I have to read, I can even show up for a psychic fair. It doesn't mean that I have to read at that psychic fair. I'm just saying, like, if it's worth my sanity or, a psychic fair, I'm going to keep my sanity. And that's what it's going to be. And you were saying that you don't charge a lot for readings. I just want to point out that the reason I wanted to get in the psychic fair is so I can raise money for my community, which is why I'm doing it. I'm not doing it for personal gain, so to speak. I'm doing it to raise money for my community, which could use an influx of cash. If you want to donate, let me know. We have covered this quite a bit. Is there anything you haven't mentioned?
Just to touch on the topic, this conversation was about Over the Hedge. We didn't really go into techniques, and that is, there's a lot of different ways, but ultimately crossing the hedge, especially when you're first beginning, it is helpful to go into like a trance state. There is a book by Janet and Gavin, which actually has a ton of actual just really good linear information about trance work in it. It's Lifting the Veil. Very, very good book. Would definitely recommend it as a read. But any method, and you'll have to experiment with the different methodologies, any method that works for you. Just make sure you're in a safe place. You're in a good place. Don't do it when you're sick. Don't do it when you're in the middle of a depression, all that fun stuff. If you've never, ever had a conversation with a therapist, maybe have a conversation first. Find out what's waiting in your id for you before you go a traipsing, because you'll find out. I think that's that. And the only other thing is, yes, we started talking about crossing the hedge, and then that kind of moved into divination. But that is honestly the most common form of crossing the hedge. People don't think of it in those terms. But you are taking yourself from this place and you're dipping into another place. We think of ourselves as rooted in this physical world, and we just kind of open the receiver and get things in. That's true, but it's not really true. We're going deep, and when we go deep, we're going down. And when we're going down, we're going up and out and everywhere. We are losing the ability of English words to describe where we're going. And the moment you move out of comfortable, well-known adjectives, you're probably over the hedge.
Yep, I agree.
I think that's going to be a good TikTok. I've never said it that way before, and I want to write that down.
Okay. I'll TikTok that. So Queen Lorelei is my person of the week, or she often comments and likes our videos, and so does Greymalk Atlanta. You know who you are. And then I was going to mention Lindsay Agriera. I think that's how you say her name. She's kind of new, but she's been liking and commenting and favoriting and sharing our videos, and we appreciate that very, very much. Resiliency Corner. I would say my resiliency corner is, if you're going to delve into other worlds, get a therapist. That's my resiliency corner. And if you can't find a therapist, find a pastoral counselor. Do some inner work. Get a self-help book. Get a journal prompt book. Do inner work and try to understand yourself better, because that is the basis of the craft, is to know. And that knowledge also means to know yourself. That's the first law of magic, y'all. To know yourself. That's my resiliency corner. What about you?
So I didn't have anything pre-prepared because I often find that the resiliency corner is more suited when it comes organically out of our conversation. Okay, so I'm going to start off my resiliency corner by saying Xena Warrior Princess. So, okay, Hercules and Xena, y'all, they hurt the Greek myth's feelings. They chopped them up. They reprocessed and spit them back out. I don't care the production quality. I will still watch me some Lucy Lawless any day of the week. There was an episode of Xena that I saw when I was probably 11, 12, 13 years old. And she was over in Asia, and she was learning how to use chi. Very interestingly, all I know is I've never been able to force push anything with chi. So I'm not as good as Xena, but I'm going to keep trying. The person who was teaching her to do this used a metaphor that I have used for the rest of my life. Like up to this point, I still use it today. The world is a will. It is a river that you are swimming inside of. When you are inside the river, you cannot see everything around you because you are going with the flow. You are seeing the other things that are moving along with you. To have mastery over yourself, you have to take yourself out of the river. Imagine yourself in that river and then climb up on a rock in that river. This is a very simple visualization that you can do. But like all things in magic, when it uses sympathy and contagion, the laws of sympathetic magic, just the act of taking yourself out of the river will ground you in a solid place and remove you from the will that would shape your perceptions.
Thank you for listening to Urban Unwitches. Please reach co-host Kyler Petrie and Rev Dia at urbanunwitches@gmail.com. That's urbanunwitches@gmail.com to suggest topics for shows or comment on past episodes. Please join our Discord channel, Urban Unwitches Podcast. Follow us on TikTok at Urban Unwitches. Follow us on YouTube at Urban Unwitches to watch all episodes. And listen to all our past podcasts on your favorite podcasting platform. Rev Dia is a witch for hire as an officiant, life coach, astrologer, geomancer, and medium, and can be reached at www.revdia.net. See you next time. Thank you for joining us on the Circle Podcast, presented by Circle Sanctuary, and produced for all who follow nature-centered paths. Join us throughout the week for various programming connecting with the community around the world. Please don't forget to watch for updates on the Circle Sanctuary website at www.circlesanctuary.org. Follow us on Facebook at Facebook.com/Circle Podcasts. We can also be found on your favorite podcast hosting sites, such as iTunes, Spotify, and others. Until next time, many blessings.